Hey everyone, I'm Peter Zablocki, the host of the Daily History Shorts podcast. Happy 4th of July, everybody. I hope you guys check out today's Friday Conversation Series episode with award-winning historian Tim Bouverie, where among other things, we discuss the fragile alliance between the big three leaders of World War II. Meanwhile, welcome to another bonus episode in our Today in Context series, where I provide some historical context for events happening in the news. Today we discuss the historical context of the 4th of July celebrations. Not necessarily what the 4th of July holiday is about, because I assume we all know, but really the history of how we celebrate this day. Ever wonder why we celebrate the way we do? And what about those fireworks? Well, here is the rest of that story.
Yesterday, December 7th, 1941,
it's one small step for man, one giant leap for mankind.
Mr. Gorbachev, tear down this wall.
The 4th of July, or Independence Day, has long stood as America's most defining civic celebration. Though July 4th, 1776 marks the official adoption of the Declaration of Independence by the Continental Congress, it was only gradually that the date transformed into a widespread national holiday. On that historic day in Philadelphia, after weeks of heated debate, the 13 colonies formally severed political ties with Great Britain. While most of the delegates did not sign the declaration until August, July 4th became the symbolic birthday of the United States. The very first celebrations of independence were modest but symbolic. Bells rang from Independence Hall, guns fired in salute, and bonfires lit up the night sky. In Philadelphia, crowds gathered to hear public readings of the Declaration. These early festivities reflected a sense of triumph and daring, with Americans basking in their defiance of a mighty empire. John Adams, who had fervently supported independence, predicted that the day would one day be celebrated with pomp and parade, games, sports, guns, bells, bonfires, and illuminations from one end of this continent to the other. Although he believed July 2nd, the date of the actual vote for independence, would be the true day of celebration, it was July 4th, the date printed on the Declaration, that captured public imagination. In the decades that followed, July 4th evolved from a monument of political rupture into an annual ritual of national affirmation. By the 1790s, as the young republic grew increasingly polarized between Federalist and Democratic Republicans, the first two political parties, the day took on partisan overtones. Federalists used it to emphasize the strength and stability of centralized government, while Jeffersonians celebrated the rights of the common man and local autonomy. In other words, the actual celebrations were divided among political lines. Oratory became central to the holiday, with towns hosting public readings of the Declaration followed by speeches from local dignitaries, often laced with political subtext. Thus, the Democratic Republicans had their separate celebrations, while Federalists had their own. Meanwhile, community picnics, parades, militia drills, and fireworks only added to the festivities. Then came the War of 1812, often dubbed America's Second War for Independence, which brought renewed patriotic fervor. Victories such as the Battle of New Orleans infused the public with a sense of national identity, and July 4th celebrations became much more elaborate. By 1820s, nearly every American town and village observed the 4th with some form of a spectacle. The year 1826 marked a particularly big moment. If you remember from an episode I did a week ago, John Adams and Thomas Jefferson, the founding fathers, former presidents and one-time rivals, died within hours of each other on July 4th, exactly 50 years after the Declaration was adopted. This coincidence struck the American public as almost divine, only reinforcing the holiday's mythic status. As the 19th century progressed, July 4th became increasingly tied to greater democracy. During the Jacksonian era, the holiday moved beyond just elite political circles and became a genuine mass celebration. Working-class Americans joined in parades, participated in town festivities, and gathered in public squares to hear patriotic speeches. Yet the holiday was not without contradiction. For enslaved African Americans, Native peoples, women, and many immigrants, the ideals proclaimed on July 4th did not necessarily reflect their lived reality. One of the most searing indictments of the day came in 1852 from Frederick Douglass, the formerly enslaved abolitionist orator. In a speech delivered in Rochester, New York, titled, "What to the Slave is the 4th of July?" Douglass declared that the holiday revealed the nation's moral hypocrisy. "This 4th of July is yours, not mine," he said. "You may rejoice, I must mourn." His words exposed the tension between the nation's founding ideals and the enduring injustices, and it is one of the most famous speeches by Frederick Douglass to this day. After the Civil War, Independence Day took on a new meaning as a day of national reconciliation. While initially celebrated mostly in the North during the war years, after all, the Confederate States of America did not celebrate Independence Day during their short existence. It did gradually become a shared occasion in a reunified country after the war. Veterans of both the Union and Confederacy used the day to come together, remember their sacrifices, and reflect on a more unified future. As the country industrialized and urbanized in the late 19th century, July 4th celebrations became even more organized and commercialized. Cities held large parades with floats and marching bands, and parks became venues for public concerts and firework displays. The growing influx of immigrants during this period only added further layers to the holiday. In places like New York, Chicago, and Boston, ethnic communities hosted their own versions of the celebration, blending traditional American symbols with cultural customs. Irish Americans, for example, incorporated Catholic masses and parades led by bagpipers, while Italian Americans offered food festivals alongside patriotic songs. For many new Americans, the 4th became both a rite of passage and a declaration of belonging. In 1870, Congress officially made Independence Day a federal holiday, though it remained unpaid for federal workers until 1938. As the 20th century dawned, technological advances made fireworks much safer and more accessible, and they became the staple of both large city events and small-town gatherings. Still, it did sometimes turn dangerous. Firework-related injuries and deaths led to the Safe and Sane Fourth movement in the early 1900s, especially in the cities like Chicago and San Francisco. Civic leaders promoted alternatives such as parades, concerts, and water carnivals, encouraging families to celebrate 4th of July without any risk. In other words, without any fireworks. After World War II, the 4th of July became an increasingly televised, mass media spectacle. The Cold War only added to the new dimension. The holiday was framed as a celebration of democratic freedom in contrast to Soviet totalitarianism. Naturalization ceremonies, military flyovers, and patriotic film reels helped reinforce a sense of American exceptionalism. One fun fact, in 1954, the fireworks display on the National Mall in Washington, D.C. included synchronized music broadcast live on national radio, one of the earliest examples of what would become a cherished tradition. As for the origin of fireworks as a July 4th tradition, well, that dates back to those very first celebrations. John Adams himself envisioned the day being marked with what he called illuminations from one end of the continent to another, as I already mentioned. Fireworks were there at the time. They were borrowed from European and Chinese traditions and offered a dazzling, visceral representation of the American spirit, namely bold, defiant, and explosive. The thunderous noise and brilliant light echoed the cannon fire and chaos of revolution, making them a natural symbol of liberty hard won. Over time, though, fireworks became the centerpiece of Independence Day celebrations, often capping off the day's parades, concerts, and barbecues, with a display that literally lit up the skies with national pride. Perhaps no fireworks show better embodies this tradition than the Macy's 4th of July fireworks in New York City. Those were first launched in 1976 as part of the U.S. bicentennial celebration. The show was an immediate success and has become one of the largest and most iconic annual fireworks displays in the entire country. Produced by Macy's and choreographed to music ranging from salsa marches to pop anthems, the display draws millions of viewers along the East River and on national television. Each year's show involves over 50,000 shells and effects, sophisticated pyrotechnic choreography, and weeks of preparation. What began as a one-time marketing effort for the 200th anniversary of the Declaration of Independence has actually transformed into a staple of American celebration, turning the sky into a canvas of color and sound, and cementing fireworks as the emotional climax of the national holiday. Today, the 4th of July is an eclectic mix of tradition and reinvention, from small-town pancake breakfasts to Major League Baseball games, military flyovers, and citizenship ceremonies. The day serves both as a festive tribute to American independence and a stage for reflecting on its promises. Thanks for listening, everybody. Happy 4th of July, and I hope you guys tune in again tomorrow for another episode of the History Shorts.